Niall Ferguson, in your book Civilization, you talk about the great divergence being over. Did we see this when Europe went to China instead of the US for money when they needed it most?
It was a powerfully symbolic moment, wasn't it, to have the head of the European Financial Stability Fund going cap in hand to Beijing. Europeans asking the Chinese to bail them out? I mean, back in the 1970s, when I was a teenager, that would have been completely unimaginable, because then it looked more like China needed aid from Europe.
Is it a fait accompli that China is going to win? Or could it be another case of what we saw with Japan's rise and fall in the 80s?
Well, I certainly don't think it's a done deal. There are many, many things which could cause China to stumble near term. They have a major problem in the shadow banking system that's sprung up around their overheated property market. So watch that closely, because I think that could turn out to be as big a story as Europe. Longer term, they have all kinds of demographic and environmental issues. Plus, they don't have one of the key things that made Western civilization so successful. They don't have the rule of law, private property rights, and representative government. So, for all kinds of reasons, I don't think it's a done deal. But I don't think China is Japan. I mean, Japan was at a much more advanced stage of development when it hit that massive wall that caused 2 decades now of practically zero growth. No, China's not there. China's more like where South Korea was in the 1980s.
Well, is Europe turning into Japan?
I think it may well be, but with a difference. Japan is a homogenous society that doesn't fall apart when it comes under economic stress and strain. Europe is not. I mean, this is a multinational confederation. And I think what we may be witnessing right now is not only a European slowdown, but also possibly the disintegration of Europe.
Well, can the US reinvigorate itself? According to Tom Friedman in his latest book, he says we have the tools, we just don't use them.
Well, that's the core argument in many ways of my book, Civilization. The institutions and ideas that made the West great are still here. But we need to kind of recognize there are some viruses on our hard drive. I mean, the killer apps are there, but we could do with downloading the updates. And we need to reboot the machine. And in many ways, we've got great institutions that work really badly right now. And that's what we need to address.
Well, empires generally don't end well. As a student of history, you probably know this better than anyone. What are the dangers facing the American empire right now?
Well, not everybody likes talking about American empire, but let's face it, if you view the world from, say, Afghanistan or Iraq, it looks like an empire, and it looks like one that's in retreat. Now, rapid drawdowns of troops in the greater Middle East, I think, raised the prospect of a spike of violence in these places, because I don't think anybody can claim credibly that it is really such a stable situation there that we no longer have to have a major military presence. So my big worry is that, as so often in the past, when an empire retreats, particularly from strategic heartlands like Mesopotamia and Afghanistan, that's when the violence actually escalates, and you enter a period of real geopolitical instability, which, from the vantage point of the price of oil, could be really quite troubling.
And as they say, the market doesn't like instability. Is the pair trade for the coming years, decades, to short the US and go long China? Is that the safe trade now?
I don't think so. In fact, I think you could lose quite a lot of money on both legs of that trade. My sense is that the United States will get its act together, and that we're probably going to see, even within 12 months, the signs of recovery that we've been looking for so vainly. Because ultimately the United States still has a great deal more vitality going on, say in the tech sector, than anywhere else in the world. And one shouldn't lose sight of that in these somewhat gloomy times. Meanwhile, I think China could stumble, and indeed I would rather be long some other emerging markets like India, which looks to me like a place without the demographic problems or the political problems that China still has to reckon with.